You're listening to the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. In this episode, I talk about an acronym that I have titled FATA, F-A-T-A. Now, what that means, and we'll dig into it in this episode is to start talking about ways that you can eliminate fear, anxiety, tension, and anger, F-A-T-A. Eliminating fear, anxiety, tension, and anger from your life. Keep listening.
Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached super achievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here.
Okay, so eliminating fear, anxiety, tension, and anger. Normally every week I think through what I want to do, and I'll start the week prior and I'll start making some notes and jotting some ideas down, and I'll look through things I've done in the past and old notes, or I keep kind of not a file, but just some ideas of what I want to do podcast on. And this week until today, or actually last night, I had it all thought out. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do for this episode, which I'll do in a couple of weeks from now. But my brother-in-law, the shaman, Don Javier, came over last night, and he was talking to me, and he was talking about fear, anxiety, tension, and anger. And I said, you know what, and it just hit me. I just go with what I sense for the episodes. And it hit me that, that's what I want to talk about this week on this episode. And the frustrating part is I always go with my sense, S-E-N-S-E. I can't spell today, S-E-N-S-E. I go with my sense. And the frustrating part is when I'm like, okay, here's what I want to do an episode on. And I get it all organized in my mind. And then last minute, like today, I change my mind. So anyway, I want to talk about the conversation that he and I had last night, and that I want to make this a two-part episode because he was talking to me last night. None of this is new to me. I mean, I've been working with him for 25 years now, but he was talking to me in a way that he really hadn't talked to me before. And what started the conversation, he was like, how are you feeling? Meaning, as if you've already listened to the last episode, that I had a hemorrhagic stroke a couple of months ago, and I'm healing, and very well. And he said, "How are you doing?" Kind of the first thing when he walked in, and we started chatting, and he started talking about how and what I said to him was just laying everything out for you. And I'm not going to go too much into it this episode because I want to save it for the next episode. But the first month out of the hospital, the medications really weren't working for me, meaning to control my blood pressure. And it was going really, really high. I mean, like where doctors are like, you should go to the ER if it goes that high and stuff like that. But yet I was on meds for this. So technically it should not have been happening. And what I've recognized really profoundly, and by the way, it's under control now, but what I've recognized profoundly in the last 2 months is I got online, on Amazon, and I started looking at some things, and there was this one blood pressure, and it wasn't a medication. You can't sell that on Amazon, but it was basically a natural formula, a remedy that people were talking about. And a lot of the comments were about, well, this worked for me when blood pressure medication did not work for me. Now, I had never been on blood pressure medication before. Well, for a little bit I was earlier in the year when I had heart failure, which I'll talk about not on this episode, but another one on how you can heal yourself, which is partly what today's about. but the blood pressure medication wasn't working, and I was having a really hard time managing the blood pressure the first month. And it's under control now. But I told my brother-in-law, Don Javier, last night, I said, you know what I've really, really come to understand is we can do all the external things in the world, whether it be diet or exercise or, or medications or acupuncture. We can do all these external things. But what really matters is the internal game. Literally, the internal game. And that's how we manage our thinking, which I know this, I've talked about on many episodes specifically. And I've talked about, running your own factory, if your mind is a factory and a metaphor, and how do you manage and all that kind of stuff. Last night, when he started talking about fear and anxiety and tension and anger, and when he talks to me, he never talks arbitrarily. He's always talking, if he's talking about whatever it is, there's always a reason for it. And these are all things that I've, for the most part, worked through through many years of being with him and working with him. And I look back over my life at the many years, and 25 years ago, and I've been in this field for a lot of years, but I look back at all the fears that I used to get into, and ridiculous things, and I call them ridiculous now. And back then it was like, are people going to like me, and is my content good enough, and this program and that program, and can I, am I as good as a presenter as this, all these social things. But I look back at all the fear and anxiety and tension and anger, and I was never, and again, I'll save this for the next episode, I've never been really classified as an angry person, but yet I had many, and almost a lifetime of low-grade anger, just being angry at, the world and different things around me. And, a lot of you are just, we're angry, air quote, at just normal things in life. Our mother-in-law and our mother and our father and sometimes our kids and different things. And we spend all these years being angry. And a lot of times we learn these behaviors and we learn these things, and we don't even recognize that we have habituated being fearful and anxious and tense and angry. And if somebody were to say to us, me, you, us, somebody were to say, well, do you consider yourself to be an angry person? You would say, no, not me, when that's all delusional, and that the person really is an angry person. So I started thinking about how much I've dramatically changed over the years. And then I started thinking about last night, and he was here. He came here at 8 p.m. and he was here till I watched the sun come up. I went to bed at 7 a.m. this morning, and he stayed till about 6 this morning and talked to me and some other people that were here that work with him. And throughout the night, I was thinking, I said to myself, he never talks to any of us as a group or individually without a purpose. There's some reason that he's talking to me about fear and anger and tension and anxiety. And then I said to myself, how much fear and anxiety and tension and anger do I have still left in me that I don't even know that I have left in me? And this relates back to, when he walked in, he said, how are you, etc., which is health and wellness, because he's always and I've never seen him sick in all the years that I've worked with him. And he's always talking about your highest state of function as a being. Your highest state of function is a state of well-being. And if you're not in well-being, then you are in some sort of dis-ease. And then generally that comes from, and I've learned this. I really have. I've learned it, yet I'm still mastering it. Let me put it that way. But I've learned that whatever happens in our body first starts at some level in our mind, because we're multiple levels of consciousness. We operate in multiple unified fields. We're multiple layers of consciousness. And of course, because a lot of it's unconscious, 95% of it, we don't recognize it. we don't recognize how much is going on at a level that we cannot air quotes see. So I know that, he was talking to me for a reason last night about my own fear and anxiety and tension and anger. And as I started this episode, I could definitely relate to these. I mean, if you said, Jim, are you an angry person? Like I said earlier, no. I mean, no one that knows me can ever say, and I would bet money on this, they could never say, Jim, I've seen you yell or scream at anyone. I'm not a yeller. I'm not a screamer at people. And many years ago, I would have classified that and said, well, I don't yell at people because that was my definition, is that angry people yell and they scream. And if I don't yell and scream, then I must not be an angry person. But yet, for many years, the shaman that my brother-in-law worked with, that I also worked with, who was a mentor of mine, for many years back in the early 90s, he would be like, you have to let go of your anger. Repetitively, you have to let go of your anger. And for many years, it didn't make any sense to me because, I was defining it in a way that wasn't consistent with the way that is being explained to me, and I just wasn't owning that. So I look at fear and anxiety and tension and anger, and I'm like, okay, so I had heart failure at the beginning of the year of 2020, which I'm completely healed from, which I'll talk about in next episode and other episodes. And I know that because cardiologists have told me that I have no heart failure, yet I was diagnosed with lifetime congestive heart failure, which is people do not air quote heal themselves from that, yet I'm completely healed. And my brother-in-law even told me 2 months ago, I was at his house for dinner, and I was talking about heart failure. And he goes, I think I mentioned on this podcast, his intonation was, and his words were, you're already over that. You're healed. And then I was in the hospital, 2 months later, and they're like, the cardiologist at the hospital, I went through all these, heart tests and everything else, are like, you have a really strong heart. So anyway, I was looking at, okay, so if I had a stroke, all right, which I did, a hemorrhagic stroke, how much did fear and anxiety and tension and anger contribute to that? But I'm not even aware of myself running the fear or anxiety and tension and anger. Because, like, for example, when it comes to fear, literally, and I know because I know how I feel emotionally when I think about it, a big fear that people get into is, are people going to judge me? Well, I already know people are going to judge me because I'm out in the public and doing things. So actually, I own that. I don't care because I already expect it. And I tell people one of the easiest ways to transcend the fear of judgment is to invite it and expect it, because now you're not being resistant to it because you already know it's going to come. Okay, let me segue from the podcast for just 1 minute. The fact that you're here listening to my podcast means that you're serious about transforming your life from the inside out. Now, that being said, you're going to want to mark your calendar because I'm doing a live no-charge training starting on March the 4th. It's a 3-part transformational training, and it's called the Be, Do, Have series. And what we're going to do is we're going to dig deeper into the ways of identity that you need to be so that you can actually change the things you need to change so that you can have the health and the wealth and the success and the money and all the things that you want. So whatever you do, mark your calendar for March the 4th, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, and visit jimfortin.com/be2have. And again, whatever you do right now, get registered for this no-charge training. Okay, back to the episode. So anyway, I'm kind of in my mind categorizing and as of last night, going through fear and anxiety and tension and anger. And I thought, well, you know what? If this pertains to me, it definitely pertains to all of us as human beings. And candidly, I pretty much for the most part have my stuff together in life. I really do. And I'm like, geez, if I'm doing what I'm doing at the level that I'm working at and doing pretty well, and I'm walking my talk, and I still have all this in me that I'm not aware of, And then I thought back to 25 years ago and myself. I'm like, how much of this does the everyday, Bob and Mary walking around, how much fear and anxiety and tension and anger do they have in them that's destroying their well-being, that they don't even know they're getting into the fear and anxiety and tension and anger? So last night and today, I said, you know what, to myself, I'm going to spend 1 week, because see, what we love to do as human beings is we love to answer immediately. And again, most of us are blind. I don't know how to correctly pronounce his last name. I think it's Anatole France, France, even though it's French and everything, I believe. I think he said he said one time that the greatest ability of man is the ability to deceive himself. So we love to get into the self-deception. And we can say things like, no, and I've seen it, for crying out loud. I mean, it's like, are you blind or what? Even with my students. But people will be like, no, I'm not angry and I'm not fearful. And they'll mix and match. I've conquered this, but I'm still working on that or whatever. Not even seeing, because they've habituated the fear or the anger or, the tension or anxiety. They've habitualized it, not even recognizing that they're getting into it, but not even calling it by that name. So I said to myself, I'm going to take 7 days and I'm going to observe myself. Now, what I want to share with you is we tend to forget things. That's why I put alarms on my phone all the time for things that I'm doing and I'm working on myself. Everything from, holistic regimens that I'm taking, everything I just put on the phone and put alarms on it until it becomes habitual. So me sharing this with you in the podcast, you could hopefully be saying, yep, that's a good idea. You know what, Jim, that is a great idea. I'm going to do it. And then once you stop listening, to this episode, and an hour later, you're going to be off to something else and you're going to forget this. And then you'll spend the whole week just perpetuating your behaviors again, not even knowing you're perpetuating your fear and anxiety and tension and anger. So I would say, however best it works for you, spend a week and a couple of times a day checking in with yourself, maybe even at lunch and at dinner or the end of your day, and just asking yourself a simple question. How much of FATA, F-A-T-A, the fear and anxiety and tension and anger did I get into prior to lunch? And then just kind of take some time and survey how you showed up before lunch. Were you angry because the vendor didn't show up, or your boss said this, or your mother, you hung up on her because she said that, or the kids forgot their lunch money, or your husband did this, or this, or your, survey around lunchtime and make a note. So you've got, let's keep it easy. Let's do Monday through Friday 10 times. Take your next, Monday through Friday and do at lunchtime and do, in the evening. How much fear and anxiety and tension and anger did I get into in the morning and in the afternoon? And take a survey of yourself, literally. But what I want you to do first, before you do that, is I want you to have a clear definition of how you define what is fear to you and what does it look like, which we'll get to in just a moment. What does fear look like to you? What is anxiety or being anxious? How do you represent that to yourself? What about tension? How do you represent that to yourself? And then what about anger? And that one's pretty easy for a lot of us, for most of us. So for me, for example, and something I'm still working through, which was partly wrapped up in all these things that I'm learning about myself and healing and creating well-being, is that I grew up with a father who had to always be busy. My father was literally like nonstop busy. And I did not remember till recently, last week or so, that my father used to work us as kids. I grew up on a farm. And my parents were even arguing one time. My mom was saying, why can't the kids just be kids on Saturday morning? And my dad would literally have us working by 10 a.m. Saturday morning. And as I look back now in retrospect, 45 years ago, it was all busy work. I mean, basically, metaphorically, move this pile of XYZ from here over there, move the pile from, make the yard nice and neat and clean and mow the yard and blah, 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 and everything's, nice and neat. And then guess what? 2 weeks later, we'll move it all back again. And I was busy as a kid. And I remember that. And then I look at my adult life, and I'm going somewhere with this. In my adult life, even till the last couple of years and last year, I had to stay busy all the time. I'm a doer. Even though I talk about be, do, have, and I know definitely that being is the genesis of personal creation, I would go do things. I would decide what I had to be and how I had to be, and then I would go do and do and do. And I've been one of those people that it's hard for me to sit still and that, you know what? I can be doing something right now. Instead of just lying on the couch, no, let me do something. Let me get on my phone. Let me do, and that creates, where I was going, that creates tension in me. Why? Because if I'm not doing enough or I'm not doing things that I think I should be doing, that creates tension. And so I had all this tension in my life for decades, not even knowing and not even calling it tension, but it was almost like a low-grade anxiety because the tension was causing that. So really what I want you to look at is in your life, define the fear and anxiety and tension and anger. What do they mean to you and how do you represent them to yourself? And then what I want you to do, as I said a little earlier, is around lunch, just stop. Set a timer on your phone to remind you. And you can put FATA, F-A-T-A, on your phone as a reminder at, noon and 8 p.m. at night. And FATA at noon. Okay, how much fear and anxiety and tension and anger did I get into this morning? And then evening time. And then what I want you to do, no judgment. Do not judge yourself. That simply creates it creates fear in people because you're like, oh my God, I'm bad. And what's going to happen because I'm bad? And tension, well, I shouldn't do that. And anxiety in people and all. Stop. Just stop. And watch yourself for 1 week. That's all that I simply want you to do is observe yourself, and that is it. The reason I'm doing all this is because this fear and anxiety and tension and anger, I didn't really think about it this way till my brother-in-law, Don Javier, and I were talking about it last night. Now, I've thought about it this way before, but these rob you of well-being, literally. And the phrase that he used last night, I never classified it as that, but he said these are all negativity. And I always, in my life, classified negativity as what, the Debbie Downer negativity and the bad attitude and the complaining and all that. And when I just sat and thought with it, even though it's very basic, I'm like, yeah, those are negative emotions. And so I thought, and what I'm sharing with you is how much, because they affect your well-being, how much negativity do you get into throughout your day and you don't even classify it or recognize it as negativity. And then you look at a whole different vein, we're not going to go here now, but is the law of attraction, which is physics. And then we're all vibrating frequency. So we attract what we are through frequency and vibration. So if you're into the fear and the anxiety and the tension and anger, and I have thought about this part, so what is your frequency and vibration? And what are you attracting back to you? What kind of life are you creating for yourself? And specifically, here's the thing for me, because I've been working on it, I've mentioned it many times in the podcast, is I'm working on well-being. And if I'm in fear and anxiety and tension and anger, then I am not in well-being. And if I am not in well-being, then I am not in my highest function. And if I am not at my highest function, then what I'm quite literally doing, is shutting down my spiritual connection. And my highest value is spiritual growth and spirituality. So for me, to live at the highest function of myself is to take a survey of what I call these 3D ego things. what I call, and the phrase that I use in shamanism, the tonal, Tonal. The phrase that everyone else uses is ego. How much of this ego, of the fear and anxiety and tension and anger do I get into and don't even know it? And I perpetuated for many years. A couple of more comments here, or at least one more comment, is I know people and I coach people and I'm friends with people that are very successful people, socially speaking and financially speaking, and online and everything else. And, for example, you could make, and I've seen this, you could make $5 million a year. And by the way, trust me when I tell you I do very well financially, so I understand those kind of numbers, and it doesn't change. For most people, it doesn't change your state of well-being, because your state of well-being is independent of your finances. Literally, that's how it works, but many of us make them actually dependent upon each other. But where I was going is that many times we think, oh, because I've got the perfect marriage, yet your finances are upside down. You don't ever attribute to the negativity that causes, or the tension, or the stress, or the anxiety, or the fear, or the anger, because your finances are upside down. So what I'm saying, I'm talking to every single one of you. I don't care how well known you are, how famous you are online or offline or whatever. I don't care. I'm talking to everyone. This week, your assignment, which I've already given it to you, I'm not going to recapitulate, is to observe how much fear and anxiety and tension and anger you get into. Because then what I want to do in the next episode is let's dig a little deeper into those. Because ideally, my goal for you would be the goal for me is to live at my highest function as a being. We're all cosmic beings. We're all spiritual beings, whether we want to believe that or not. There is an essence in us, and I want to live at the highest function of that. And I want that for you, because when you live from there, then it brings you all the things that you want in the external world, the relationships and the money and the Mercedes Benz and the house and the Aston Martin and the boyfriend and the girlfriend and all these things that we air quote want. When we're functioning at high levels of spiritual being, I promise you, because I've done it, it's very easy to create those things. But yet where I was missing the boat, and this year was my wake-up call for me to be able to serve you guys at a greater level, is health. Now, I've always been in great health. I mean, I've not had until 2020, I had not had the flu in 20, which I still haven't in years. Had the flu in, let me put it this way. I had not had the flu in 20 years. And I've not had not until, last year, had a medical prescription since 1992. So in my mind, I was categorizing I'm perfectly healthy, when in essence, I had some of these things mentally operating like a battery on a cell phone in the background operating, which contributed to what happened in my health this past year. And Don Javi and I we were talking last year, and he goes, all this happened to you so that you can grow and evolve and you can reach more people. So that's what I'm doing with this episode, is just sharing with you part of my journey, where I am and what's going on. And hopefully you can see yourself in your life and the fear and the anxiety and the tension and the anger. And you know what? Let's explore that and let's put that behind you. Okay, there's no transformational takeaway this episode. We'll continue on the part 2 of this on the next episode. Take care. If you would, please share this episode with your friends and people you think will find value, and I'll catch you over on the next episode. Make it an amazing week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this entire podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with your friends and family. If you found value, they will too. So please share via your social media channels. Also, if you have questions, I'm here to assist. You can email me questions to support@jimfortin.com, and I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. Also, if you want transformational content like this daily, connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram name is I am Jim Fortin. Finally, I do have a personal request. I believe that we're all here to help others and to grow and evolve ourselves. Together, you and I, let's help more people. If you would please leave a review on iTunes, and a good one, by the way. I'd be grateful, and through your assistance together, we can transform more lives. Thanks for listening.